I call upon the Prime Minister.
We believe that you should have the liberty, or any person should have the liberty to do what you want with your life. No other people should interfere with what you think you want to do with your life. And we think that if you want to sacrifice your health for a greater good, you should be allowed to do that, and that life has no value in yourself. Therefore, assuming participants have consent and have free knowledge of the risks and the possible consequences, we would allow our citizens to participate in thirst games. This will mean that if you are above 18 and you can provide legal consent, you will be able to participate in thirst games, where these competitors are battling against each other for survival and trying to survive as long as possible, and the winner will receive fame, glory, and riches. And so, to start with, you will have the liberty to do whatever you want in your life. This goes for other areas as well. It's not exclusive for this case. We have people that go to polar expeditions to put their health in danger in order to reach fame, to reach glory, and for money. We have people that climb mountains also for the same reason, to appear in magazines, to gain money. They actually make a living out of this very, very, very dangerous thing. And we have people who... there are many dangerous sports, such as UFC and cliff jumpers, that jump off cliff with parachutes, that risk their life every time they do it, and they still do it because they wanna fulfill their life, and they have another view of what's important for them, which we are not in any position to say you're wrong and you cannot self-actualize yourself in the way that you want. We think that if you want to put your health in danger, and if you want to sacrifice your life, you should be allowed to do it. I'll have the closing.
You see that the difference with thirst games is that somebody has to die for me having glory, what's not the case by climbing mountains and all the other stuff.
That's true, but we still think that people should have the possibility to do this, and because it goes for their life in general. Like it's kind of a symbol for that. Some people are always dying and suffering in this world at the expense of others. So we think that this can raise a lot of philosophical discussions about how life is in general for other people as well. And we think that this could provide opportunities in the community for an ordinary citizen to discuss this, and how we interact with each other in society, and how we interact internationally across borders from countries. We don't think we should morally interfere with other people's dreams. If they have a dream that they want to achieve, no matter what we think about that dream, they should be allowed to pursue that dream, no matter what we think about it. We think individual freedom is way more important than any kind of spiritual notion that we might have of what life is supposed to be. Every man has the right to decide or women have the right to decide for themselves what they feel their life should be, and what they want to get out of their life. I will have closing again.
Yeah, don't you think that life has a responsibility to society he's living in?
Every man has a responsibility for the society, but he has an even greater responsibility towards himself. And we think we should not interfere with this principle, which is one of the building blocks in our society, because you are not allowed to harm others, although there are no laws against harming yourself. If you want to hurt yourself, you can do this in any other ways. It's not illegal to commit suicide. It's not illegal to harm yourself in other ways, or try to get adrenaline rushes, as I explained, by doing dangerous activities. So our society is built on the ability for its people to self-actualize themselves and to do whatever they like inside of the framework that makes our society function, which involves not hurting other people and interacting with each other inside of the legal framework that we have. and with this motion that we have with these games, the competitors will not go behind the legal framework that we already have and what we think is right in society, because we say there's a clear difference between actually hurting other people and between hurting yourself. As you are the person to decide what you want to do with your life, well, other people in society in general, if we make that example, if you are a normal citizen that have not actually been a part of these Hunger Games, it cannot really be compared to the voluntary participants in these games that have allowed to put their health in danger. So all the participants in these games will have consented of actually getting harmed by other people, and by the nature, and maybe from thirst or hunger or any other harms that they might be hurt by, as opposed to the normal society where we have not provided any consent of actually harming ourselves. But there are occasions when we do this, like for example, like in dangerous sports, like UFC, when the competitors have to provide consent that they might get harmed, and they might even die as part of that sport. And in these cases of fighting sports, the goal or the winners could actually be that one that knocks the other one out and puts the life of that person in danger. So if the goal of these games are also to harm, the goal is not to harm other people, but if you harm other people, you will have a greater chance of becoming a champion. And we think that because you have the liberty to do what you want with your life, no matter what other people think about it, because that life has no value in itself, because you should be able to self-actualize yourself without the state or anyone interfering with your dream, and because this can provide philosophical discussions about life and entertainment. We propose this. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister and call for the proposition.
Ready? Okay. Madam Speaker, honorable judges, thank you for the floor. While we agree with opening proposition that freedom of choice is important in a Western liberal democracy, and the state should do as much as possible not to interfere and not to stop people from doing what they want, we think that we draw the line at the point when your actions as an individual start damaging society or start hurting other individuals. And this is exactly what I'm going to prove to you in my case. I'm going to analyze and show you the negative effects that this proposition, this idea, this reality show will actually have on society and the way we operate with it and interact with other peoples. And then I'm going to explain why this contract as a whole is simply not legitimized. But before that, I just said, my rebuttal to what we just heard from the previous speaker is that even if we accept the idea that an individual is first and foremost responsible for himself and for his own well-being, we think that when we're talking about the government's position, the state's and society's job is to actually take care of the entire society. And it's exactly the same example if we take smoking cigarettes. Why we allow individuals to smoke cigarettes and risk their own health because that's what makes them happy, and we assume that they can make that choice about their own health. We do not allow, for example, smoking in public places where you can actually hurt the health of other people. That is why we have all these laws against smoking in public places. Because as the government, our role is to protect the entire society from the actions of the individuals. So that basically brings down all that we just heard from the previous speaker. No, thank you. let's talk for a second about how reality actually shapes the way we interact within society. Because we see that today reality shows are taking a very big space in the time that they are actually broadcast in TV. We see more and more realities showing up, and we see more and more people, especially young people, especially teenagers and kids who actually watch this show. And while probably didn't put any age limitation on watching these shows, we can assume that even if there was one, kids today know how to go bypass it. How there are parents who will allow their kids to see it. There is the internet where it's really open out and you can see basically whatever you search for. And we think that because reality has taken such a large place in society, it actually affects the way people act. We start imitating the role models when we see in these shows. We see them as cool, strong, inspiring people, especially the last one, the last survivor, if we're talking about this specific show, the last powerful man or woman who survived, who brutally killed all the other people in order to win this trophy. We see him as a hero and we want to be like him because he is the winner. He got the fame and fortune. What do we learn from this? Two main horrible things. First of all, it makes us perceive life as a sum-zero game, meaning I can only win by stampeding completely and bringing down everybody else around me, meaning my success is only on the expense of other people, of bringing those people down. And if we're talking about people who are, and teenagers, who are going to in the future to shape our environment, to shape our society, we will see, for example, now kids not working together, not cooperating because that's against the perception of how do I actually win and achieve my goal. Then we will see kids, for example, putting a leg to someone who is running, stealing books before a test, putting something dangerous like cleaning material within food. Why is that? Because this is how I see is the best way to succeed. This is how people actually reach fame and fortune within this. And we're saying that if we want social solidarity in the future, if we want to educate people to actually help those who are in need, the weaker parts of society, for example, this will not happen when the role model, the main role model that we will see will be this kind of action. And we have reasons to assume that if this show would actually broadcast, because it would actually have people participating in it, it will get a high rating. Why is that? Because it is exciting, because it's thrilling, because it's something new. Which brings me to my second damage. And we're saying that this decreases the value of life. We are showing here that life is something that it's very easy to gamble on. It's no different than a bill of money or cards. You can just throw it into the game and you know what? May the odds be ever in your favor. And we think this is a horrible way to perceive life, which you only get one time. You can't rewind. You don't get your life back the moment you lost them. What we're saying is that when we put this show on air, when we allow people to participate in it, then it actually makes our tolerance to violence even higher. We are now willing to get, if you want the public for rating, we want more excitement, more drama, meaning we will need more and more brutally killing, more and more violence. And we're saying that this is extremely important and dangerous. No, thank you. When it sets the perception that violence is a way of entertainment. Violence is a way for seeing a good show. If this is how I see a good show on TV, if I see real people, because this is a reality, this is not a cartoon, I see real people fighting to death. Somebody who can really very easily be my neighbor, not just this random actor from some other place. These are people like you and me fighting to death. I learned from this that this is a legitimate way to abuse myself, to act out, to find fun. And unlike boxing that was presented in the previous speaker, in boxing, the main goal is not to kill your target. The moment that you have thrown your opponent on the floor and proved that you are stronger, the game ends. There is a judge that says no more. We do not allow to go to this extreme because we do not want these effects on people. Before I continue, apparently closing does want this.
Okay, yeah. So do you think in the status quo, people who watch any kind of television are unable to separate their own lives from what they see portrayed on television? So, i.e., if I watch Survivor,
but thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. We say that the big difference between reality shows and regular shows, like I said, is that I see real people that look like you and me and look like my neighbor. We see that there is that the competition between them is legitimate to work out this way. And we're saying that, and moving on to why this basically not a legitimate contract, and it ties up to this actually POI, we're saying that unlike other circumstances, like extreme sports, for example, when we're talking about this specific situation, the chances of dying are practically almost 100. Second thing we're saying, there is no return, there is no rehabilitation afterwards. You cannot go back to the life you used to have. Third thing, there is no opt-out. If you change your mind the moment you are in there, there is nothing you can do about it. This is like slavery, and we assume that proposition would not accept somebody signing himself off to slavery, and this is basically the same concept. More than that, we're saying that unlike the army or every other extreme sport, in those situations, you have somebody taking care for your well-being and surviving. In this situation, it's the other way around. You have people messing with you for entertainment, for more drama, for more extreme, for more rating. We think that this is inherently wrong. Thank you.
I think the legal opposition and upon them to be Prime Minister.
We don't think people in our society directly learn from television. We think television is inspiring, can be entertaining, and leaves us metaphors and room for inspiration. What we're going to show you today is 3 different points. First of all, I'm going to talk about those people exist in our society one way or the other, and they would do way worse things if not in our TV show. Second of all, we have the idea that it's a useful metaphor for the destructiveness of capitalism and ultimately actually makes a lot of things so much more interesting. And as a third point, we believe that yes, freedom is only then worth it if you can live it as freely as possible, and it shouldn't be limited. So that's the first point we already heard about before. A little bit of rebuttal that didn't fit in. So the idea from closing somebody has to die, that's true, but they also consented to it. It's the same way when you claim like, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to hurt anyone. As we pointed out earlier, of course you should normally not hurt anyone, meaning you shouldn't hurt their freedom. In our society, we're completely fair with you hurting other people if they consent to it. That's why you could have SM clubs, that's why we have smoking clubs. You say like, oh, but smoking is so dangerous, but still you have smoking bars where everybody consents to the idea that yes, this is dangerous. As soon as everybody in society consents to them being harmed, we think it's usually legitimate. Why is that so? Because if we look at ourselves in society, we think that ultimately the individual experience of each of us is so specific that the state cannot judge what's most important to you and cannot give us the highest priority of how you should act in society. Maybe for me as an individual, I need fame, I need being rich, I need to be in all those situations so much more than I value my own life. And maybe there are people surrounding me in society who share those values. We do not see and we do not hear sufficient harms where those people have less of a value and less of a right to express themselves freely and lead the way they want to lead their own lives. We think that life only then becomes meaningful if you're allowed to do with it whatever you please. Just as you might have remembered from the first debate, preserving life for any means is not a necessarily benefit in itself if it doesn't mean you have the quality of life associated with it. That's exactly the point we're trying to make. If for you quality of life means striving as hard as possible for richness, for fame, and all those possibilities, the state not allowing you to do so in this specific way of expressing yourselves, we believe is very, very harmful. Then we hear this idea from them that there's a responsibility to society, yet again we also see a lot of people in society not choosing to take this responsibility and the state not always forcing them to it. The state can't always force people to do the morally right thing because we believe that individual rights are ultimately more important, again because of a certain moral relativism, that we don't believe that the state always knows what is the ultimate perfect moral choice to make, and the state has learned over time that forcing people into these moral decisions usually means even more coercion and usually means less of a social progress than letting individuals by themselves and through market forces sort those things out. So kids will see a lot of bad things. That's a nice argument. That's true for porn, that's true for horror movies, and a lot of other worse things. We even have Hunger Games, which is directly marketed to young adults, so we don't really see how people would learn anything significantly worse than they already do just because it's real, because A, those other things seem horrifically real as well. You can see people die in real life in India, some sort of snuff movies if you look online, so you don't really see how this significantly changes the status quo enough to limit individual freedoms under those circumstances. So we don't really believe that's necessarily true. And the whole idea of no opting out, again true for most extreme things. If you watch this amazing video of Russians climbing a second highest building in the world. There's no opt-out when you're on the top of the highest tower in Shanghai, but it's an amazing experience you do for fame, you do for yourself, you do for the experience, and even if there's no opting out for them, we think it's a legitimate choice for them to make because they profit from it, other people might be entertained from it, and we don't see a fundamental suffering on their side of the house. So, first, really, really big substantial point. Who's doing this? Those are people who make the rational decision because they're consenting people of saying, I care less about my own life than about being rich and famous. I'm willing to go to the most extreme of possible legal circumstances to do those things. What does that mean? Those people are heavily committed and heavily driven by the idea of becoming rich and famous, and they're willing to literally go over dead bodies to it. Now, we see there are certain alternatives society gives you. Under our model, you have the alternative with consenting people to engage in a game where they now, with similar ideas and similar ideologies, might be able to kill each other. Why not? What's the alternative to those people who are so driven by their wish for greed and their wish for money? They might become prostitutes, criminals, even worse, investment bankers or hedge fund managers. There are so many possibilities for those people to do extremely negative things, all of which are more harmful ultimately to society than participating in a game which is clearly considered as a game. Because unlike them, they're not indirectly killing millions of people, say with collapsing factories of H&M in Bangladesh, say with exploiting other mechanisms. Those people are literally killing people as well. That's part of the capitalist system, except that's socially tolerated and way more abstract and therefore apparently okay under your model. We think people inherently driven by greed, inherently driven by negative motivations, will tend to find ways to express themselves, will find ways to do so. And if we have any obligation as a state, as we can't limit all of them, and if we can't force our moral on all of them, is to give them ways of expressing themselves that have least harm to society. We believe our model has significantly less harm, has a benefit of possibly even entertainment. And this whole idea of being imitating is simply based on the second point, namely that people blindly learn from things they watch online because they're incapable of making rational decisions. Before that, please explain the point.
If you sign up a contract that allows me to kill you, would you deem this contract legal or would you charge me with murder?
I have no idea what it is, but actually if somebody allowed, like I can sign a contract that you can kill me, I would be fine with that. So, because I would be stupid enough to sign that contract. So the big point is now, we have a useful metaphor of what society is about for people. Like people don't directly learn from it because this is highly abstract. If I go out in real life, I rarely see scarily clad people shooting with bows at each other to kill each other. That's not necessarily something where I look at, I see these Hunger Games games crossover thing, and now think that's the way real life works. People are able to see it as an abstraction because it's, maybe you can call it art, maybe it's entertainment. Anyway, people don't take at face value what they see in reality TV. If they would, our society would be damned anyway. What we can see in our circumstances is those people see something that's highly abstract and highly different and makes them think about what life is about and what the society we is about. Maybe not all of them, but we think a significant amount of people see the absurdity underlying this model. The absurdity that in our society people are willing to sacrifice everything, including other people's lives, as long as they consent to playing the game, just to become rich and famous under those circumstances. We think that's a perfect metaphor for what capitalism has become over the recent years. That people are willing to overcompete with each other, to completely disregard any type of human life under the pretense of now they've agreed upon it. And unlike our game, there is no opt-out to real life, and currently there is no opt-out to capitalism. What we see right now is that people are forced to live in a society where it's a normal value to always push as hard as possible. Our abstraction, our artistic form of pushing it to the extreme, to the most crazy limit, has the highest chance we can imagine right now of ever starting a reasonable good discourse, of showing people the absurdity and the degree of which our society has come so far. We think that's somewhat deplorable, but it won't be stopped by banning Hunger Games or First Names. If anything, we have a chance of starting a discourse and making people question the underlying models. What have we shown you today? Individual freedom is important as long as it doesn't harm other freedoms and we have consenting adults. We believe strongly that capitalism can and should be changed, and to do so, you need to look at the underlying mechanisms. One of those is First Games. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and call Deputy Leader Constantine.
Un momento, por favor. Madam Speaker and other honorable judges, we wanted to assume in this debate that side opposition will not agree to someone signing a contract allowing me to kill this other one, and they actually think that I should not be deemed as murderer if I execute it, and they think that this is actually a valid contract. What we are going to do for you today is two things. First of all, we are going to show you that this is an illegal contract and we're going to analyze it properly. And second of all, we are going to talk about the social implications and especially the backlash that we just heard. But before that, what we say is that you only need to agree with us on one of these things. Why? Because if it's an illegal contract, because there are no such social benefits from it, we say that it's let alone enough a reason to buy our side of the house. And second of all, if you do not think it's a legal contract but agree that the social implications are so vast and bad, we think it's a loan to cancel out this motion. But first of all, before the points, a few points of rebuttal to what we've just heard. He actually says a couple of things. He says that in his first argument that these people actually do worst things. First of all, a logical leap. How come people that want to join to reality shows will now become, will now do things like murderers or for God or no, will now become murderers, will now become thieves, will now do other things. We say, moreover, that these shows actually pushes these people to the extreme. I'm going to deal with it at length at my substantive, but the dramatic effects, the way that it is presented, the way that you put them on a pedestal, the interest of the shows in order to push them to the maximum is what causes these shows to be so extreme and not the people themselves. Moreover, we put these people on display, meaning we cause them to be more extreme, and moreover, again, now society actually perceives it as an extreme thing, but again, we're going to deal with it much more later on. And moreover, they do not even know how it feels like to be in such a thing, because no one has had previous experiences like that of being taped 24/7 in these in these circumstances. Second of all, regarding the second point of it being a destructive metaphor of capitalism, thus creating positive discourse, we were not proven anyway in this debate how come we're going to get positive discourse from that. Moreover, Stavov actually explained to you how we're going to get negative discourse first, especially on children, which is not properly about it. But moreover, we say that even that if you see suffering every day, we have many alternatives to capitalism under the status quo right now. People are waking up. We do no shame. We have Occupy Wall Street. We have other things. Most people, you've said yourself that some people, that hedge funds, etc., are bad. We say that you do not need these things, and moreover, we will not proven how come it's going to change. Let's start with the first point. Is it a legal contract? Because what we assume under us, that is actually consent and information enough for it to be a valid contract. We are saying that no. How come it's not a valid contract? Because who is likely to actually take upon these deals? We're saying that these are likely to be poor people. These are likely to be no. These are likely to be people that tend to review the short term over the long term, because it's much more easier to see myself winning money. It's much more easier. It's actually the incentives of these shows putting the winners on a pedestal rather on dreaming on myself dying. But moreover, even if they tell you that they see the people dying, and this is the rebuttal to us, what we say is that the dying is glorified. The dying looks like a movie because this is how they display it, like an action film, rather than an actual human being, dying. We say that because they actually have the incentive to push them to the extreme, and because I'm going to be presented by a really nice salesperson who tells me that I'm going to improve my life, it's going to look really assertive, it's going to look like this is my way out of my current lifestyle, even if I want these things. What we say is that they're not going to get a proper clue, and the bottom line is that they're not really rational when they sign this thing, and this is what's going to happen in reality, even if they are going to be informed of the dangers, even if they are going to have some contest, even if they're going to give their consent. Meaning, because it's this way, what we're saying is exactly like slavery, which we do not allow under status quo in society. How come? Because I'm going to be tend to prioritize the short-term benefits, not having to care about other things in my life. But the crucial point here is that I do not have actually the way to opt out. Because when the previous speaker told us that some people climb mountains, climb the Russian mountains, and they can just go back and extreme sports are okay, this is where you actually have an option to opt opt out. Because if I start to climb the mountain and it's really hard and it's scary, I can go back. If I had a bad experience, I can go back. In these shows, once I've actually given my consent, we have shown you in this point that I do not know what I'm signing up for, and it doesn't matter how we try to notify these people. I'm not going to be actually allowed to opt out of it, which actually makes exactly like other things like slavery, which we do not allow, like trading with organs, like slavery, which all of this we do not allow under the status quo in society. No. Okay. Moreover, you know what? I'll take first. Yes.
We're in a Western level democracy, so you don't actually need to do this for survival, but for self-actualization. So there's no real meaningful coercion upon getting rich and getting famous. So that doesn't mean poor people have no rationality whatsoever, and we should allow them free will.
Sit down. We didn't say that poor people have no rationality. We said that they're most likely to sign these contracts because they're poor. We've said that what's more likely to cause them to happen is they're going to dream themselves getting money in the short term. They want to glorify themselves in the short term, and they do not know what they're signing. And assuming that government side didn't take the burden of showing us how come slavery is okay, how come trading with organs is okay. No, how come trading with organs is okay? It actually falls under the same category. There's things that we do not allow people to do, even if they are called self-actualizations. And the bottom line of this point is that it's not actually a legal contract, as we've explained, because they failed to show some positive benefits. This point is alone enough to win them in this debate. Let's talk about the social backlashes of these things. I've already started showing you the negative implications on children. I'm going to continue on that. We're going to show that I'm going to claim that it's going to percolate to social behavior. How come? Because the culture is already obsessed with reality shows. People talk about them all of the time, but most importantly, people replicate these behaviors. Now, we're not going to say that people are going to replicate everything they see on TV in real life, but some things are copied. When I see Bugs Bunny, taking the hammer and pushing it on other people, I actually do it to other children when I'm playing with them. These people are going to be some kinds of role models. We're not saying that now people will think and will do everything that they do, but these games, and this is what differs them from other reality shows, will have the incentive to be the most extreme. We're actually going to see real people get killed in these things, and it is alone enough for you to believe that some of the behaviors in these games are going to replicate and percolate in society, which is enough to show negative implications, and everything that my partner has given you stands so far. We have shown you two things which I'm not going to repeat because I do not have more time. I'm going to say thank you very much, Honorable Judges and Madam Speaker.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition and all the speakers in the top half, and well on,
The reason why I'm starting off the speech by saying the odds are ever in your favor isn't just because I'm making a reference to the Hunger Games. It's because I and my partner Franny recognize that what we're talking about is odds, risk. To what extent can an individual take risk upon themselves? The risk of death and the risk of physical harm, but also the chance that they might succeed. To what extent can people evaluate this, and to what extent can people make these decisions? When can people take risk upon themselves? When can the government step in? That is where I'm going to focus my case, but before I get there, I want to talk a lot about what we've heard from opening opposition. First, we hear the idea that no human being has the right to hurt someone else. In a vacuum, sure, but they use the example of smoking, and that they say we don't let people do it in public. Right, we don't let people do it in public because the people around you aren't consenting to the risk that smoking a cigarette carries. They're not consenting to taking that risk upon themselves, so we protect them from it. But this changes when people do consent to incurring that risk. That's why we're okay with smoking-only bars or smoking-only zones, because the only people who are harmed are people who are willingly incurring the risk, either of being there or of smoking a cigarette themselves. And we think that the same principle applies, even if it's quite exaggerated, in the case of the Hunger Games. The only people who could possibly be harmed by this, at least physically, are ones who consent to taking the risk of death upon themselves, to taking the risk of failure, and weighing that against the risk of succeeding, and they, for whatever reason that individual feels they would be successful, they make that choice. To the extent that an individual makes this in an uncoerced, informed way, quite frankly, we're fine with it, even if I individually would never do that. Secondly, they say that these individuals become role models and shape how we view society. First, we want to respond by saying that people are able to differentiate from what is reality and what is not, from what is reality TV and what is the way in which people actually live their lives. And quite frankly, we feel comfortable saying that people don't watch TV thinking to themselves, this is how I should behave. We don't think people go through that thought process when they watch anything on TV, let alone reality TV. We don't see anyone looking at Kim Kardashian approvingly. Quite frankly, when people watch their show, it's usually to mock her and usually to avoid that style of life. Because quite frankly, everyone thinks it's appalling. If people really are as apt to follow the example of crazy famous people, then we think that, that's something at which we would restrict viewership. That's why we restrict bloody movies to not have kids watch them. We restrict horror movies to not have children watch them, because they're not the group of people who are educated enough to be making this decision. That's why we put it for people who are over 18. The main extension coming out of the second speaker is the idea of a legal contract. They say the people willing to do this are likely to be poor, and they're, on some level, their economic circumstance somewhat forces their hand. First off, we think this is something that is not a free decision. When someone is so coerced by their economic situation, they necessarily have to make a choice, or their choice becomes more appealing. We think at that point, that isn't a free choice anymore. A good example of this happening is many people in the developing world are coerced into prostitution by their economic circumstance. And we think that if people are making this choice because they don't have an economic alternative, or their economic reality is skewing the way they perceive the world, then that's not a free choice. That's a coercive choice because outside factors are influencing your decision. To debate this motion, we presume that individuals are making this choice in a vacuum, in a way that is not influenced by coercive outside factors. Maybe a poor individual could be coerced by economics, but this is something we are modeling out because, quite frankly, otherwise we could not have this debate. Sorry. They use the example, the second reason they believe it can't be a binding contract is because you can't undo this behavior. And this is something I think is important. But I want to respond by saying that, quite frankly, you can't undo anything you do. You can't take back your first cigarette, even though the risk once assumed is something you decide against. That by making any choice in living your life, you're assuming a risk of something that might go wrong, or a risk that something bad will happen to you, even if the risk for most things is quite small. Just because something might not even have a physical harm, it still becomes part of your lived experience, still shapes the way that you see the world, even if you try and back out. We think everything you do, you can't undo, and that isn't something they can claim on that side of the house. They use the example of slavery. First off, we're fine with indentured servitude, provided it isn't being coerced either through threats or through economics. But secondly, we also want to say that slavery is completely different because it's an institutional system that almost literally kidnaps people and puts them in slavery. It is not an institution that is stumbled into by accident, usually. So, point of positive matter, risk is something only the individual can assess, and the government will respect that. How do governments operate when it comes to risk? Governments notice that risk exists, and they try to warn people to avoid that risk as best they can, or at least when they're making that choice, to be able to assess the risk for themselves fully. The example of smoking has been talked about. Well, let's also touch upon drinking. When you drink alcohol, you are assuming a small chance of liver failure future in your life, and that chance increases as you drink alcohol more. But we think that the government can still inform people as to the nature of this repercussions, and that still allowing people to take that risk themselves if they feel like it's worth it. We also say similar things of gambling. There might be a high risk of failure. There might be a extremely plausible risk of being financially less well off than before. But we still notify people of this risk and allow them to do that if they see fit. Or riding motorcycles. There's a statistically higher risk of bodily harm, but we still let people do it if that's something that people want to opt into. Any choice in the modern world carries some element of risk, and we have to at least respect the individuals are better at assessing this often than their government. Yes.
Okay. Since in reality shows, you have the production which interferes, which influences the way things happen, meaning people can never really know the complete risks, odds, chances, and what is actually going to happen.
If we're debating a motion that assumes free consent and informed decision-making, then you can't say there won't be informed decision-making. It's something that is assumed in the motion, it's something we have to assume if we want to have this debate take place at all. Okay, why is it a good idea, though, to continue letting the government continue to let people act to assume risk? The answer is where we look to the whole point of government. At its basic level, we acknowledge that every individual has their own unique wants and desires and preferences reality in different ways. That's the justification behind things like democracy. When we aggregate everyone's lived experiences, you come out with a good outcome for the majority, which would be better than things like totalitarianism. And we preference this because we acknowledge that any one individual can't know how anyone else sees the world and how anyone else preferences what realities exist. So the government is divorced from the wishes and decision-making processes of the individual. So when it comes to the individual decision of assuming risk or not assuming risk, as is the debate here, we see that the individual is the only one who's privy to exactly the way they preference the world, exactly the way they see and they preference and are willing to assess that risk. Because a government is divorced from this, they have to look to the individual, because that's the whole point. Thank you.
I thank the member of government and co-member of opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, people are not only individuals, but they live in a society. And if the harms to the society are more than the benefits for the individual he made out of this choice, we should ban this, the thirst game. And we don't only have a problem with the show because there's violence and there's competition. We have this in boxing games and in sports events as well. But the problem is we kill people. And we kill people, this is a difference in quality. So we promote a bad moral value and a bad moral behavior in our society we don't want to live in. And that is the harm in our society I will extend in my points. But first, some points of rebuttal. The first point of government was that people can trade off risk against quality, and they should be allowed to however they want to. We see, okay, if it's a private choice, if nobody else is affected, yeah, then they can do it. So if they want to smoke in their own flat, it's okay. But if they want to smoke in this building, in the university, or at the train station, it's not allowed, because then they affect other people. And the second thing is, in this case, it's a complete unnecessary trade-off, because who needs this show? Is there anybody who has any benefits out of it? So if we have a problem with their people lack of getting fame or money, then we should get better welfare systems and promote their education, that they get better jobs. And there are so many different reasons we can do to promote all this thing. And if there's a necessary trade-off, we think it's okay. We need firefighters, but we don't need anybody committing in the thirst game for society. There's no value for society. Second point of rebuttal: people are free to choose and always do the right decision. But we see not in every case they do the right decision. We infringe liberties if other peoples are harmed, if the individual is harmed, and if the harms of society. And we see that there are systematic misjudgments of the people, and there the states need to step in to prevent those people, to protect those people from their self-decision. And we have lots of examples for this. For example, taking drugs because they aren't aware of the risks, committing suicide. We prevent people, if they want to jump out of the building, the police will come and prevent them to doing this. Possession of weapons, for example, trade with your organs, and even builders at the building site need to wear a helmet, although they don't want. So they are forced to wear a helmet, because we see if they don't, they won't do it because of laziness, and they are not aware about the risk which they can do. So, and even if we assume the individuals would always do the right decision, we see then we can ban every kind of regulation. Then we don't need states and regulation at all, and we don't think this is right. So, on my own points, I will talk about first why this show is morally wrong. Second, I will talk about the backlash effect, and third, I will talk about why people cannot do systematic misjudgment. No, thank you. First, why it's morally wrong and why it violates human dignity. Murder is something we as society regard as bad, because behind killing somebody, always there's a bad behavior. We think it's a bad value, it's a bad virtue. So if you kill somebody, for example, for greed or for revenge or for hatred, These are all we see in the action of killing. These moral virtues are incorporated. So killing in each case is a bad behavior. So it would be justifiable killing somebody if there's good intention, so protect somebody, so other people. But in this case, government committed that it's because of greed, that people kill because they get famous, and it's because of their own egoism, and we think this is a bad value and this is a bad virtue we don't want in our society. So, and that's why courts and the society regard murder as bad, and murders go to jail, and this is because of the underlying value. So, second point, and the second thing is that human life is valuable, and every person has a value in itself. So because they are being a human being, so only because of being a human being, he has the right to live, and the human dignity which it has every individual. So in this show, we compromise the life of the life of the people. So we see the underlying value is destroyed by the show to expose the show as something which is good. Yeah, I take opening.
Killing is not always sanctioned. If two soldiers, say in an army, consenting and being in those body, kill each other under the circumstances, killing is considered to be okay, whereas it's not considered for them to kill any external people. Same goes for our circumstance. If both people consent to it, are part of a group, it's okay then to kill each other.
Yeah, but the problem is, in this case, if they do it in a room, maybe we can say this is okay, but the problem is everybody's watching at them, and there I come to the second point. What is the backlash effect? Why do we harm society? Because it's a show. Everybody looks at it. It will be a big event. How you told me we have all these benefits. So people will get used to real violence. They will see how other people kill each other and how they like it and how they are excited about this. And we see what those people who experience this are soldiers, and they often have post-traumatic stress syndromes, and we see that this will be on many people in the society. And also we have fun and excitement on the suffering of other people. So killing becomes something which is cool or socially accepted, which is okay, and the moral behavior behind the killing is okay as well. So this big event we see, that's the backlash effect on the society, which come back to the society. And second, and also the backlash effect is for the winner, because the winner goes back to the society and will bring the fame back and the money, and we say, okay, killing is okay to gain fame or judgment, and we promote murder as something which is okay to gain fame and to promote greed, and that's a problem. So third point, systematic misjudgment. Why do people play the lottery? It's very unlikely that they win. The problem is that they think, okay, yeah, I will win, and it's even likelier that they are struck by a lightning, although they still play the lottery. And the problem is, in this case, we see that people misjudge risks systematically, because the people don't know. People see, oh, there's somebody very rich, but they don't see they are not good with statistics. So the numbers are very biased, and the people cannot judge what is the real risk of being died there. So we see, in this case, the state should intervene and protect those people from doing these misjudgments. For all these reasons, I beg you to oppose.
I thank the member of opposition and call government to
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We think the situations that the member of opposition told us, where he tells us these scenarios are all about where people are not aware or don't consent to the kind of risk they know. We think in the situation that we are operating underneath, where they have full knowledge and full consent of all the risks, we think in these scenarios, the scenarios that tells us about hard hats, about like seatbelts, about things like that, I think those are scenarios where we would be willing to debate them under our principles. We tell you, once individuals are fully aware of the risks, fully aware of the harms they're bringing onto themselves, it's at that point where we allow them to take risk onto themselves, and it's only at that point, under these scenarios we have on our side of the house, where we think government shouldn't be involved in deciding risk for individuals. Individuals should be taking the risk upon themselves in the way that only they are able to see fit, where whereas governments as an anomalous entity cannot see fit the best way to judge it for that individual. What I'm going to do for you today is have 2 points of direct rebuttal against the case from closing opposition, 2 points of clash the way I've seen this round. Firstly, should people be limited in their choice from participating? We tell you no. Secondly, should governments be involved in individual participation or consent? We tell you no. We shouldn't have governments limiting individual choice. It makes people's life especially more negative. Okay. Rebuttal. Firstly, he tells us this idea that governments should promote good moral values. And this is a problem because this television show, The Thirst Games, promotes bad moral values. To this, Jacob and I would ask, at what limit should governments decide morality for individuals? I think when governments try to make blanket bans to assert a certain morality for all of society, to a certain morality that then all individuals have to follow, it ignores the fact that many individuals have different moral standards by which they operate. It then institutes a large moral standard that all individuals are forced to operate under. So I think when governments have this kind of blanket policy, when governments try to promote a moral value that goes onto all of society, I think it's at that point where governments actively infringe people's abilities to operate underneath their own moral standards, to form their own moral frameworks by which they can live their life. I think this is especially negative for people when they want to have their own moral framework to live with. We think there are certain circumstances where we have blanket policies the governments have, like not harming others, except for people who have consented into it, like we've told you multiple times. When we get to that scenario, we're okay caveating it out, but I think in general, it's bad for governments to infringe on people's choices of morals by trying to institute a blanket policy and trying to promote it through this television game. We don't think it's applicable for governments to do. No, thank you. Secondly, point of rebuttal. He does a societal backlash. This will make killing cool. Why won't it? Jacob and I have told you many times that when people consent to watching this, they take on the risk of watching it. That's why in the status quo we have things like television warnings. We have things like we advise parental consent for this. We think in these situations we're helping educate people on what they're about to watch. I think in these situations we're presenting the circumstances by which proposition bench is operating under, where we give people full knowledge and consent of the risks they're taking on. So I think in the same situation the governments provide these warnings. We think in the situation of watching this television game, you're getting the same kind of benefit because you're informing the people who are watching this that this is a television show where people are fighting, that you are going to see violence within this television show. I think that better informs the viewers. They're more able to take the risk on of viewing it themselves. No, thank you. So I think that in this situation, we think that it doesn't actually make killing cool because if that was true, anyone who watched television shows like Dexter, like Bones, like other kinds of television shows that have violence, that do portray it in a real way, that do have you humanized with the people, we think that in this situation, almost all of us would be killers because I think we all probably watch some kind of violent television show or violent movie. We think people are able to distance media from reality, and this is something they haven't been able to engage with on their side of the house. Okay. Points of clash. So firstly, should people be limited in choice from participating? Why not? From opening, we hear this idea that these shows will shape the way we interact with our society. They have negative societal backlash. Now, thank you later on. 2 responses to this. Jacob and I have told you that people don't imitate TV. People are able to assess the risk of watching it. I've just told you that people are able to disassociate themselves from things that are presented to them in the form of media. I think people are aware that media is presented in a form for entertainment. We think that even if they're real things, even if television shows like Survivor have people fighting each other, have people actively engaging in violence against each other, we think in these scenarios, they're presented as a form of media. So we don't think they have the kind of negative side effects on society that they insist they do. Second response to this is, unlike second opposition say, it won't make killing cool because people opt into this entertainment. We think this idea that it's negatively impacting society is negating the way people actually interact with certain types of media. I think the reason it is media is the way people interact with it as media. We think it's presented as a form of entertainment. I think this means people aren't likely to take it as like a lesson on how to kill people or a lesson on how to act in society. They're likely to take it just as a form of entertainment. I think if people opt into being in the entertainment, opt into watching it, we're okay with that. Okay, then how else do we hear this? They tell you, OpenEye tells you there's no opt-out, there's no rehab. We tell you this ignores the fact that these scenarios are ones people opt into. We tell you most scenarios that individuals opt into, the governments allow individuals to opt into, are ones you can't opt out of. Like Jacob just brought you the idea of smoking. We allow people to opt into addictive substances. We tell you, we inform them about the risks, but we allow them to have the choice of doing it or not. People who are informed of the risks would choose to do it anyway, are ones who are operating underneath our side of the house, underneath the information that we're provided under our side of the house. So that as governments, we can't assume that we know the risk people are taking. We can't assume that individuals don't know the risk. We think we need to provide them with information, provide them with warnings so they go in with full knowledge and full consent, and then allow them to take risks they judge are best for themselves. Opening, go ahead.
Okay, when you accept age limitation, you accept the fact that kids can be influenced. In this extreme show, we cannot afford to take the risk that kids will learn and will imitate. That's why these limitations agree, and you accept that.
Okay, we think we told told you from opening was we have age limitations for entering into this contest like we do for other things you consent into, because we assume as a government the age is by the way you is the way you get knowledge about things, is the way you're most able to be informed, most able to weigh risk is when you're old enough. We think we'd be fine putting warnings in front of these shows. We think none of us have disagreed about this up and down the bench. We'd be fine warning people about what kind of television it is, the same way we do for other kinds of music, other kinds of television shows, other kinds of media that have violence or have like gratuitous scenes in them. We think we're okay with this. We don't think this is different from what was proposed originally. We think that like age limits are something we think we should be informing people about. We don't think we should necessarily be stopping them from watching it. None of us have disagreed with this. No, thank you. We secondly hear from opposition that this infringes liberties if others are harmed. However, we think we've given two responses up and down our bench. Jacob and I have told you that we think this infringes choice. We think that's what actually limits people's abilities to be involved in participating. We think when you limit choices, when you limit people from participating in an activity they fully consent into, you limit their freedom because you limit the amount of choices they have. We don't think this is something the government should do. We tell you, secondly, people have consented into the harm. This is something people should be able to do when they're aware of the risks. Second point of clash. So should government be involved in individual participation? Why not? We hear from opening opposition that it's not a legal contract. But Jacob and I tell you that other factors are what makes things not legal contracts. I think when you have full consent and full knowledge of risks, we think it is a legal contract because you're fully informed about it. We allow people to enter into contracts by which they are fully informed. When you sign a lease, when you sign into a job, you are consenting to the things that are in your contract. You're aware of the implications of them. We think this is very valid. Jacob also tells you that free decisions are the ones that matter to people. When people are allowed to make free decisions, they can form a better life for themselves under which they want to operate, under which they want to participate in. Then they also tell you that governments are the ones who value, like governments should value human life, should value individuals. Jacob and I, the most important thing we brought to you is the idea that governments, when they attempt to limit risk for individuals, they don't actually evaluate the risk for that individual themselves. We need to put it up to individuals to evaluate risks they take on, to let individuals form a life by which they can operate the best. We don't think governments should intercede in this. I think when governments try to assume the risk for the individual, they ignore what makes that individual's life better because they can know individuals as well as the individual can themselves. For these reasons, I think we should allow people to opt into this. I think when people consent into it, it makes their life better. We don't think government should be involved in that decision. For these reasons, please propose. Thank you.
I will talk about 3 points, obviously. First point is, why should we even care about individual freedom and what the government told us to why we should? Then how mature can a human being ever become? And in the end, that the society is a complex system which needs other rules and ideas than one individual doing anything. And we are talking here about a society because the society allows individual members to do something, even though maybe they themselves just want it really, really hard, we don't allow it to them. But before, one last point of rebuttal. When they say, always when I opt in, I can't opt out later, that's totally not true. If I smoke, of course I do some damage to myself, but I still can act, 5 years after smoking and stop quitting smoking and stuff like that. But when I say, okay, maybe you can kill me, and I don't allow the people to withdraw this contract, then he never can opt out at all, and it's a totally loss of freedom, and we don't think that's good. But let's come right to the first point. Why should individual freedom matter at all? What did the government tell you? The first government told you that it should matter at all because history told us to. If we don't respect individual freedom, all the people are unhappy and the societies are bad. So they themselves actually argued with the society point of view. That's why they will be in the end on our side, because the society don't want that people can allow themselves to be killed. And the closing government said individual freedom should be a good thing because when no outer stuff confuses me, I am perfect and can make very, very good decisions. And here we also say that's not our picture of how the human being actually is. It's because how mature can we be? The rule government accepted that children aren't that mature, that we should protect them from something. And then when I'm 18, I turned into, I don't know, a semi-god or something that had perfect knowledge of what's good for me and who always does the right thing more often than the government can see. And I think that's totally right. A lot of us, no thank you, know what is good for them when they come in situations where they wouldn't act like this. For example, if I'm a drug addicted, I want to take more drugs, but all the people who can reason would say, if I'm a drug addicted and no thank you, I want to, have a long life and all these aims that human beings normally have to be happy and so on, I should stop using drugs, should become clean somehow, because then I can do stuff again. So we here see that all human individuals think it's good to not being drug addicted if they aren't in this specific situation. Therefore we say the society themselves can be overall more mature than the individual in this very, very specific case. So that's the point Jan Felix actually told you when he talked about that we can have systematically misjudgments, which every individual does, but still all the individuals can see that they are. For example, if I as an individual drive my car, I don't want speed limits, I don't want to, are not allowed to park somewhere, but if I know what should be the rules for all of us, I know that there should be speed limits, because then it's better for all. The perfect solution would all others should have speed limit, but I haven't, or at least I should have my own street. Obviously that's a bit egoistic and stupid, but what I want to show you with this very, very simple example is that the human being can see abstract rules which benefit the rule system, but still don't want them to be applied on themselves. And we think that's exactly the case here in the people we talk about. All our societies can see that it isn't good for them if people are allowed, to kill other people or to take part in a game where other people ought to die so they get rich and famous. But when they make this decision, they think, but I want to be rich and famous. And then I think if they would, with their reason want to forbid it for other people, then we are totally okay to forbid it to them, because they want to be, the one example where we don't apply rules, we don't have to. Closing.
Should the government prevent anyone from consenting to an activity that might cause death, like being in a plane or a car or smoking a cigarette? Or do we believe that an individual can assess that risk and decide or not decide to take it upon themselves?
Here is what I think about it. The government should make rules where they are sensible and obviously good, and the individual should decide where the decision of the individual leads to more good overall. And now the question is, this case we are discussing about, when I say I want to be part of a game where I die or get rich and famous, is this one where the individual reason is better for society, or the overall, reason the people have? And the answer I can give you is it's better if we have rules here. So let's talk about society, no thank you, as a complex system. Like first government told you, we learned in history that it's very, very harsh if we try to suppress everyone and have no individual freedom at all. History also showed us that no regulation at all is a very, very bad thing. For example, if we have anarchy, no thank you. If we have no police, if people who are strong are allowed to just kill the weak ones and live happy, then we see that they themselves ruin a system where they could, no thank you, have even more money and better life if they don't kill the other people. So we see there are examples where rules are needed, and now I'm going to tell you why here we need rules. But before, Pierre.
Thank you, Pierre. People are willing to participate and are extremely driven by fame and cash and all those incentives. As we explained, don't you think it's very likely they choose all the legal and illegal activities and do way more harm to society in those fields than in a conscript, separate environment we provide?
No, I don't think so, because they can just do other stupid things to get famous, like eating 1,000 hot dogs, just harm themselves, and don't look that the society see, oh, it's maybe okay to kill people, because there are so many dumb things you can do to, be famous, where you don't have to take part in a game to kill others. So there are substitutes who are less harmful than this special event. So let's see society as a complex system. Why is killing so special? Because of course we don't know what is right overall, but we know there have to be borders, there have to be things we never want the government to be allowed to. And the government always should rescue my life, because it's very systematically relevant. If I'm alive, I still can have a voice, I still can change the system. That's why the government should never kill people within their own society. That's why we are against death penalty. That's why we are against, provide and make censorship. That's the reason why we think we shouldn't allow people to be killed, because as long as they are alive, they can work within the society and change it, and therefore find what's good. Don't let people be killed for fame and greed. Please propose, oppose, oppose.